We're happy to have you all here today for this celebration of life for our sister. I'm sure Dixie would be surprised how many people are here. If you know Dixie, she did not want any fuss or anything formal, but we as a family thought this would be appropriate. So we're kind of happy that it snowed outside so that we can say, well, we didn't want to stand in the cemetery and have a little ceremony in the cold weather going on us. So we're inside here where it's comfortable. We appreciate all your kind words. It has made it a little easier for us. For our celebration of life today, we just had a family prayer offered by Shane Larson, a nephew. We're thankful for Tana that she's been here to play the piano for us, and here she is. She's been a good friend all of her lives. Opening prayer will be Angela Nethercott. Whoops. A niece. Oh, other hand, right. Sorry for that. I had it here in front of me. I still got it wrong. A life sketch by Jamie Stokes, a niece. And then we'll have our first speaker, Cindy Zullis, a sister. A musical number by Tana Fonzbeck, a good friend. Speaker Janet Roberts, a sister. And then I will be the next speaker. We'll go to that point.
Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we're so grateful this afternoon that we can join together in memory of our beloved aunt and sister and mother, Dixie. We're so grateful for her life and for her joy that she shared with us, for her fighting spirit and her kindness. And we are so grateful that we can remember her, and may we always have that, carry that spirit forward with us. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Dixie Buist, April 8th, 1948 to February 15th, 2024, Logan, Utah. Dixie Ann Larson Buist, our loving mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, neighbor, and friend, passed away from natural causes on February 15th, 2024 in Logan, Utah. She was 75 years old. Born on April 8th, 1948, or 848, like those numbers. She was the oldest of 4 children born to Leland Wilford and LeVay Lishman Larson. She enjoyed living in the small town of Mendon, ice skating on the Mendon Square, celebrating Christmas and May Day, and doing harmless, mischievous pranks as a teenager. Hopefully we'll hear some of those. She graduated from Skyview High School in Smithfield, Utah, class of 1966. She married Vaughn Buist in 1968, and they had one son, Jody Vaughn Buist. They were divorced later. As a single mom, she raised him and worked day and evening jobs through many of her adult years. Dixie was proud to buy her first car, a white Ford Fairlane with a 3-speed on the tree. When she was 18 years old, she paid for it by working as a car hop at the TikTok and Frost Top drive-ins. Dixie was a sales clerk in Montgomery Ward and Smithfield Implement for several years. She enjoyed serving and helping customers. For the rest of her adult life, she worked for Logan City Corporation as a customer service representative. When city residents came to pay their utility bills, Dixie remembered their names and perhaps teased them about something as she helped them resolve issues in a tactful manner. Because of her cheerful and caring nature, she developed friendships with many of her former work colleagues that continued through job reassignments. After 31 years of work, she welcomed her new life as a retired person. She looked forward to the times when the power lineman checked in on her. She was a great storyteller and loved to talk to friends and strangers. With her facial expressions and voice impersonations, she could make the retelling of an experience so dramatic that it brought laughter. Friends and family and work associates counted on her to entertain and brighten any conversation. Dixie is survived by her son, Jody Vaughn Buist, Twin Falls, Idaho, and 2 grandsons, Tyson Lee and Hunter Jody. delights of her life. And her brother and sisters, Douglas Lee Larson, Claudia, in Mendon, Utah, Janet Roberts, Gary, in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and Cindy Zillis, Gordon, of College Ward, Utah. She was preceded in death by both her parents. The celebration of life will be held on Saturday, March 2nd at noon at Allen Hall Mortuary. Friends and extended family are invited to come an hour before the service to visit with the family. Dixie requested that she be cremated and the guests wear casual attire to the service. The family would like to thank Dixie's friends and neighbors for their loving care and kindness towards her throughout her adult years. Also, the gentle care and service of many doctors, nurses, and home health therapists is greatly appreciated. I know we'll hear lots of stories of Dixie, and I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to get to know Dixie later in my life. My parents would always invite her over for lots of family parties, and we'd see her a lot of family functions, especially after she retired. And Dixie, like the obituary said, did always have an awesome story to tell, and it was always entertaining. When there was laughter at the dinner or at the party, you knew that Dixie was involved because she always had a great story to tell. I'm grateful for her, and I'm grateful that she is a member of our family and that we got to know her and love her gifts and talents that she shared with all of us. So I'm grateful we can celebrate her life today.
I think that the obituary really sums Dixie up really well. And I want you to know that this was not part of Dixie and my plan, because we had this all planned out that I would retire, which I did, and then I would be able to spend more time with her. We could go through her house and be junk. That didn't happen. Somehow she deserted me, and I was looking forward to be able to help her, but apparently the Lord had other plans for her. So here I am now trying to speak as we celebrate her life. I've thought about the things that I would say, the good qualities, the good points that she had, how caring she was, how loving she was, and even what a jokester she was. But to start off with, I'm the baby of the family. Dixie's the oldest of the family. She was 8 years older than me, and so I really cannot remember her until she was probably a teenager, because that would have put me about 8 years old. And so basically about one of the first stories I remember of Dixie was that she was always a lifesaver for me. And the way that she was a lifesaver for me is that I had this older brother that I won't mention names. And because he was older than me, and I was just that bratty little sister that nobody really cared about, and he had to tease and torment somebody, and so who would it be? But it would have to be me. So he would tease me and torment me, and he would get me down on the ground like he was, or the floor, I should say, in the house, like he was pinning me in a wrestling match. And he would tickle me and tease me, and I would scream and I would holler. Nobody would come to my rescue. And I would pound on the floor because Dixie's bedroom was underneath the living room. Finally, she would come running up the steps. She would grab the broom at the top of the steps, and she would hightail it into the living room. I don't know how many times she actually hit Doug. Oh, wasn't going to mention his name, was I? But I know that she swatted at him a few times, and he eventually would get off of me and leave me alone. And this happened more than once that I can remember. And I think Doug got a little bit wiser, that he knew when Dixie came up the steps that it was time for him to leave me alone. And we actually have proof that this did happen, because we had a neighbor later on in life verify that she was out in her yard and she watched Doug come running out the front door with Dixie behind Doug with a broom. So that is a true story. I think Doug and I have been able to get along a little bit better since then. This is why I can say that Dixie was a lifesaver for me when I was younger. There has been other times throughout my life that she has helped me in different situations. She developed her work habits at home. This is another family story. You know, you have to have some of them. I can remember that Janet and Dixie, and I think I was probably too young, especially Dixie was in charge of getting the Saturday housework done, because my mom was at Albertsons working on Saturday. And Dixie had to make sure that she had the house all cleaned before mom came home that night. So Dixie and Janet would take our little black and white TV that was on a little cart with wheels. They would wheel it into the doorway of the kitchen and turn on America Bandstand and scrub the kitchen floor and clean the kitchen with America Bandstand music blaring in the background while they cleaned. This must have been the start of Dixie's work ethic, because I know she has been a hard worker throughout her whole life, although I don't think that she really liked cleaning house very much. Dixie was always willing to do whatever job she had. She never complained about work and rarely sloughed a day of work, to my knowledge. I think when she started for the city, she loved the association of all of those linemen and all of those city workers. Work wasn't work to her. And at this time, I really have to give a special thanks to all those linemen. And I know they have a lot more stories to tell than what we can probably tell. But they were so good to her. Even after she retired, they would still go and visit her and see her. And anytime she needed something done, they were there to help her with that. So thank you so much, all you linemen that I know some of you are sitting out there right now. About 13 years ago, she became a lifesaver to our family. She had just retired. I better do this. And had some time on her hand. She was crocheting, making blankets, do all those things you do when you retired. And at this time, Dad was having serious back problems again, and he ended up at the rehabilitation center for a year. Dixie would go there and she would sit with him and try to ease his pain a little bit, try to get his mind off of where he was at. Of course, she had to bring the dice and the dominoes too, and the cards, which I think all the linemen know about, those dice games too. She would bring them and she would entertain Dad until Mom would come later on in the afternoon. Dad was able to have his surgery and was able to go home and was able to spend a year with my mom until she finally passed away, which left Dad there by himself again. And once again, Dixie stepped up and would go over and help Dad, take him places. Maddox, of course, was one of those places that she had to take him every now and then. And she would help him out and do the things that he needed help with. Gordy and I decided at this time that we would invite Dad to come over and have dinner with us once a week. Because Dixie was by herself, she could come too. So we had the privilege of having Dad and Dixie in our home at least once a week for dinner. There was meals that were good. There was a lot of talking, a lot of those stories again, a lot of dominoes, a lot of dice games also. But this was the time when I really felt that I was able to get closer to my sister. She was available to do more things with us. I wasn't so busy with my family too. And so I really felt that I was able to get a little bit closer to her during this time. I have one story that I have to tell about her having dinner with us. Occasionally our son Andrew would be there to enjoy dinner with us. One night we'd had dinner, we got the dishes all cleared off the table and was taking and putting them in the sink. And I had got one of those new fancy high-rise faucets over my sink, you know, the high kind. And so Dixie was over there and said to Andrew, Andrew, how do you turn this water on? And Andrew said, oh, it's voice activated. Just tell it to turn on. So Dixie said, water, turn on. Nothing happened. She turned to Andrew and she said, it didn't turn on. He said, we got to be a little bit louder. So a little bit louder, she said, water, turn on. Nothing happened. She looked at Andrew and he said, maybe you need to be a little bit closer. So then she'd move in a little bit closer and he'd say, we gotta be a little bit louder, a little bit closer. I don't know how many times she tried to get that water to turn on. And Andrew and I was there just laughing at her to think we were getting the best of her. finally, when she's like, Andrew, it just won't work. He just went up and turned the lever and turned the water on. And then she looked around, saw us laughing, and realized that we had played a prank on her. She was able to laugh and joke about it too. She took it all in stride and started laughing with us. She was good at playing pranks on others, but she could also laugh when one was played on her. I'm sure that there's many other stories that could be told about her jokes that she played on others. We enjoyed having her over to all of our fish fries, our shrimp boils, our prime rib, at dinners, any activity we had, she was always invited. And everyone enjoyed it when Dixie came to the party. Our kids loved to tease her and enjoyed getting to know her better because of the time that she had spent in our house. Just as she was a lifesaver to me for many years, I watched her be a lifesaver to Dad as he moved into the assisted living. She would run errands for him and go and visit him all the time. Her relationship with Dad was strengthened because of her willingness to serve him. When COVID hit and we couldn't go visit him, it was hard for Dixie because of the time that she had previously spent with him. Dixie had a lot of love for other people. She cared deeply for others and was concerned about them. When she started having health issues, I was more than willing to be of service to her because I had watched all the service that she had done, especially to our dad. I have loved being able to spend time with her and will miss helping her. There's one number that I don't think Doug and I will ever forget. And Jamie mentioned it, and it's at 4848. And I'll tell you, I would take her, Doug and I would take her to doctor's appointments. We take her to the pharmacy to get her prescriptions. We take her to the hospital, and the first question they ask is, what's your birthday? 4848, just that fast, 4848. She could rattle that so fast that I'm sure it stumped them, thinking, what was that she just said? And they probably had to think about it for a little while. Sometimes I wonder if she was annoyed that they had to ask her, so she was trying to stump them, or she was making it hard for them to understand what she was saying. And like I said, I think I have her birthday memorized better than my own birthday, because that 4848 is just embedded there. Dixie was the best sister that I could ask for. We had our differences, but we also had our likes. I have lots of memories of the kind, loving, hardworking, positive, jokester, life-saving woman that she was. My life has been blessed because of the love of my sister. I had a quote given to me last week that I think sums up: those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear. Although she has passed away from this mortal life, the gospel of Jesus Christ can ease the burden of death and make this pain easier for us. I know that because of Jesus Christ and his atonement and his resurrection, that we will all be resurrected, and that I will be able to see her again, and we will be able to continue the sisterhood that we have had in the past year. Jody, Marilyn, Tyson, Hunter, I want you to know that I know Dixie loved you very much. Quote on the back of the program is something I hope that you can remember throughout your life. It says, when we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love that they left behind. May you carry the love that Dixie has for you throughout the rest of your life. And these things I say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I told Claudia that what I'm going to play needs a little explanation. A lot of you probably don't know that Dixie's parents and my parents were best friends. And we did, as families, a lot of things together when we were growing up. And weekly, we were doing something together. And so Dixie became a really, really good friend. She was always really nice, really helpful, really kind, really fun. And I enjoyed all the time I spent with her. And when we became teenagers, we started to do things together, not just with our families, but also with our friends. And it was the 60s. And anyway, when we got married, our lives went different directions. I didn't see her a lot after that. But Dixie was the kind of friend who is always your really good friend. So I want to play a song about friends. So even though I don't play rock music well, I'm going to play With a Little Help from My Friends, the Beatles song, and then Somewhere Over the Rain.
So I'm privileged to be able to pay a tribute to our older sister Dixie today. And I remember her mostly as a teenager because I was a preteen when Dixie was 15 and 16. I was 11 and 12. And I looked up to her for everything. She taught me all about pop culture. So when she was a teen in the 60s, she listened, like Cindy said, to the TV show American Bandstand. And in her room, in the basement, she always played KCPX radio with the top 40 hits. There were times at this time in the generation of the world that they said the teenagers and their parents had a generation gap. And what happened in our family and the families of the Menden gang is that President David O. McKay said we should start family home evening one night a week on Mondays. So our parents got together with their friends and decided we would have the first family home evening all together. 10 families, it's about that many, 9 or 10 families. And so we gathered at the Bartlett household for that first one. As I remember it, it was the only one we had. And so we had a lesson, and then the teenagers were responsible for teaching us how to dance. So what happened is Dixie and Tana Bartlett and Mary Jean Willie and Sheila Young were our entertainment, and they taught us how to do the twist to Chubby Checkers and the swim to Good Vibration by the Beach Boys, and a lot of other funky dance moves. I remember Dixie's favorite song was Diane Renee's Soldier Boy. She had 5 albums by that lady. And we also had hits by Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones. And I thought it was great that our parents honored the teens to bridge the generation gap by having us have fun and dancing together. And that's Dixie. She brought fun and joy wherever she was. She was my smart and savvy older sister. She was my hero, and she understood men. So it seemed to me that Dixie could attract young men like a magnet. I would watch their faces light up as she would talk to them, tease them, laugh with them, and flirt with them. One Sunday on a hot summer day, one of the young men in Menden asked Dix, he was the only person that called her that, if she wanted a ride home, and I tagged along. So he drove a red 1960 Impala Chevy with the big fins on the back. He pulled out the church parking lot and headed to Menden or to Wellsville on the highway that joined them. Now, in the beginning, he drove very slowly, and I was very comfortable because you have to realize that I was 12 years old and the only car I'd been in was my dad driving. So you all know how my dad drove under the speed limit. So we had a nice gentle ride down the hill. And as soon as he got to that stop sign that led to the bottom road, he put the pedal to the metal and we were flying. And I was so scared, like my hair is in my face and my face is all scrunched up and my neck is pinned to the seat. I was sure I'd break my neck. And then under that was the muffler and the rumble in the back. It sounded like it was right under me. I was terrified. And before I knew it, we were at Darley's barn, like 5 seconds. So we must have been going 100 miles an hour. And then he stopped and did a U-turn. And they turned to look at me and I'm breathing again. And I thought, oh, now we'll have a nice calm ride back home. Dixie looked at him and he winked at her and off he did all the way back just as fast. Just one of the ways Dixie liked to tease. Dixie was my favorite storyteller. Now, my daughter Tessa remembers this from 30 years ago. So I'm going to try to tell this the way Dixie did. So we're all sitting around the dining table and Dixie says, I've got some good news. Okay, what is it? I've got a tattoo. Wow, nobody had tattoos then. And I'm thinking, oh, please, I hope it's in a discreet spot and I hope you don't show us. And she said, guess where it is? We're frozen, we don't dare say. And she says, you can't see it? Look closely. It's on my face. We're like, it's not on her forehead, it's not on her cheeks, it's not on her neck. This is what she did. It's right here. I have eyeliner on my bottom and eyeliner on my top. And guess what? I won't have to wear makeup for the rest of my life. Dixie was also a straight shooter. She loved you and you knew it. And if she didn't particularly like you, you knew that too. All her life, I think that Dixie kept her trials and her sadness inside. She was fiercely independent and she handled all of her problems herself. Until the last few years, when her health issues have required more dependence on the family and friends. And I'm sure that was hard on her to be so independent. I will always remember Dixie as a funny, good-natured person. She's always shown love and support to me and to Doug and to Cindy and to our spouses, Claudia, Gordy, and my husband, Gary. Dixie was a kind caregiver. She watched over Jody and her grandsons, Hunter and Tyson, as the light and joy of her life. She loved to talk about you guys and show pictures of all of you. In most of the pictures you watch today, think about Dixie in her younger years. She was always smiling. I just love this picture of her. Then in her teens, if you notice on any of those pictures, there's a little bit of defiance kind of slipping out. She told me a few years back that she was sorry for all the grief that she had caused our parents as sort of a rebellious teenager and young adult. And then she said to me, in all seriousness, I just hope that the help and care that I've given them in their senior years will somehow make up for all my earlier sassy ways. She said, I gave them a lot of trouble. So I want to tell Dixie, it's a gospel principle from 1 Peter 4:8 that says, charity shall cover a multitude of sins. Dixie, I think you got this one covered. Now, I'd like to end with my second tag-along story about her caregiving for me, and then I'm going to give you an analogy. So when I was in kindergarten and Dixie was about 9 years old, maybe a couple years past this picture, Mom asked Dixie one day if she would go to Joyce Hibner's and buy a dozen eggs. So Dixie headed out on her bike. She had an old blue bike with really fat tires and a big wide fender on the back. And I hopped on the back with my legs spread across. She's on the seat and she's pumping to Joyce Hibner's. It's 2 blocks. The first block is easy, it's flat. And then the second block is a steep hill down and then a gradual hill up. So she pumps down the hill, we're coasting, we go back up, we make it to Joyce's place, buys the eggs and puts the eggs in the basket in front. Now we're headed back and she pumped down the slower slope and we got halfway up the steep one and we're not going fast anymore. So she starts pumping harder and when you pump hard, how the bike goes back and forth left to right and my legs are going left to right. And all of a sudden, my left ankle is caught by the guard. And as the spokes come around, it's scraping my foot and bruising me. And I'm screaming bloody murder. So Dixie just stopped the bike. And I remember seeing the dozen eggs all over the asphalt road. And she did something very valiant, I think. She realized that today is not about the task or the job or the eggs. It's about taking care of your sister. So she carried me. She carried me that last block. And I'm sure that it was hard and that I bawled louder and louder as she got more breathless. But she ran and she got me back home to mom and dad, and I was safe at last. And believe it or not, Dr. Francis made a house call. I still remember he put 3 different colors of salve on my ankle and wrapped up my foot. I hopped around for about a week and I healed just fine. I have the scar on my left ankle to prove it. I see now that Dixie has been carried home by her and our older brother, even Jesus Christ, our Savior. He brought her back home to our parents. He brought her wounded and tired. And I'm sure she was greeted by Mom and Dad, Leland and LeVay, and our grandparents and our ancestors. I'm sure that they greeted her with so much love and joy and assurance that she was finally safe and peaceful and happy at last. And like Dr. Francis, our Savior put salve on her wounds, physical and emotional, and I'm sure that made her feel more love than pain. I'm sure that he has freed Dixie of all the hurts, injuries, and injustice of her life. And like the scar on my ankle, he has scars to prove that he died for her. So Dixie's passing is now only the beginning of another chapter in her life journey. She's right now learning new lessons with our earthly and heavenly parents. Dixie, I want to say that your true self, your kind and good self, can shine even brighter now. Please talk to us, Dixie. Please let us know in our minds and our hearts what we can do from this side to continue helping, respecting, and loving you on the other side of the veil. You have certainly helped and loved us and made our lives richer and better in countless ways. I love you, Dixie. We love you. And I say this in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Cindy's story is pretty true, that I was kind of a bully. But for some reason, I had this idea that when mom and dad left, I was in charge of them 3 sisters. Somebody had to be in charge, so it was me. And I remember too, I was putting a hold on Cindy, and I was actually training her for when she gets married and has to wrestle with Gordy, that she could break loose and get away. But if I remember right, them sisters finally learned that if they give me a little tickle under the arm or so, I would start laughing, giggling so hard that that's when I would run out of the house with the broom chasing me. So if you remember back when we was kids growing up in the house, Dad built that house by himself with some help from friends. He was not a contractor. It was kind of a small house that had 2 bedrooms upstairs. And the 3 of us, if I remember, I shared the same bedroom for years until finally Cindy come along, and I guess they decided there was time for change. So I remember too that instead of what you call timeout these days, for us it was, oh, you're getting locked in the basement. So I think the 3 of us spent quite a bit of time down in the basement with the door locked, of course. And the floor was clay. Dad hadn't finished off the basement yet, so we would entertain ourselves playing in the clay. And eventually Dad did finish the bedroom, put it in the nutty pine bedrooms, and it was pretty cool. Dixie and I got to go downstairs into the bedrooms. So when I was looking through the Dixie's had an autograph book. I guess when she was sixth grade, seventh grade, it was cool to have an autograph book, and you'd have all your friends autograph your book. And I think it was really designed for if you met a movie star, somebody important, you'd have this book. They could hurry and sign and put their name in it. So I had quite a bit of fun looking through the book, the autograph book, and with it was one of Dixie's birthday parties. I want to read you what was in the Herald Journal. This is posted in the Herald Journal that Mom must have wrote this and put this in here. Dixie Ann Larson celebrated her 6th birthday Thursday with a party given by her mother, Mrs. Leland Larson of Menton. Refreshments in an Easter motif were served to Tana and Deborah Bartlett, Mary Jean Willie, Gail Hibner, Peggy and Dennis Jensen, Charlie and Freddie Woodward, Linda and Marcia Archibald of Wellsville, Kent, Dale and Dallas Nelson of Iron, Doug and Janet. Dixie's grandmother, Mrs. Elmer Lishman, her aunt, Mrs. Elda Nilsson, Mrs. Shirley Jensen, Mrs. Elmer Archibald, and Mrs. Ross Bartlett were in attendance. In the evening, color slides were shown to Mr. and Mrs. Elmer, Rena, Linda, Kay Lishman, Mrs. Rena Lishman, all of Wellsville. Refreshments were served. I thought that was pretty interesting that would be in the paper. I remember Mom and Dad growing up, they had a garden spot by the house, and they was always raising garden of different vegetables. I remember I was out there weeding with Dixie, and she was in the pea patch eating peas. And then all of a sudden she was in a panic, ran in the house, took in the emergency room, and that's where they discovered that she was allergic to peas. And then sometimes I would forget that, and then I'd watch her, she'd pick those peas out of anything we fed her. She was pretty cautious of that. I talked to Aunt Eleanor, that would be my dad's sister. When we were kids, were growing up, we spent a lot of time at my grandfather's farm. That's where all the action was. That's where all the work was. She says that Dixie really loved to get on the horse with her. She liked to hang on tight, and Eleanor would always have a race horse. They would go pretty fast. But she never did like the horse. And I don't think she liked animals hardly at all, ever. Don't remember her ever having a pet. So when I was going through the autograph book too, I found out, I picked something out. Some people would write a cute little poem in there. So I have one that I picked out of all those. This is what it says. Dear Dixie, when you grow old and ugly, as people sometimes do, remember that you have a friend that's old and ugly too. And that was signed Love. You know who wrote this, Tana? It has Tana on the bottom. So. And then it says, P.S. Hope you have a happy life, and I know you won't get old and ugly. So that was interesting. I remember the first car we talked about, that white Ford Fairlane, when Dixie brought that home. She was so proud of that car that she was able to pay for it. And that was her cruising vehicle. You know, she would like to drive up and down Main Street in Mendon, Little Mendon. Her and Eva would get in it, and they would talk and have a great time. And then I remember too that she was so proud of another car. She bought a red car. I remember, I don't know if it's the one she has now, but she says, look at this. I have this key fob. This is a key to the car. And I said, what? I've never seen one of them. That's pretty cool. I never seen one of them. Yeah. They tell me that I cannot lock this in the car. I will never be dumb enough to leave this in the car and lock it. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And she showed me, you know. Well, a few months later, she says, another one of her stories, she says, yeah, I was in the shopping mall or in the store, and I was shopping, and I come out, reach for my key, and oh man, I realized it was in the car. And she said, no problem, and went to open the door, it was locked. and it was locked with the key inside. And I thought, what? How could that be? Well, anyway, she found some kind person there that gave her a ride home, and then she picked up the spare key and went back and unlocked it and got in. And I'm sure knowing Dixie, she probably knew their whole history by the time she went and drove home, picked up the key and got back home. She always liked to tell a story, and she could always add to the story. I remember one of her stories was that she was going down Main Street following the ambulance. And she says, oh my goodness, all of a sudden the back door opened up.
I know where this is going.
And she says, a cooler fell out. And they just kept driving, a cooler. I says, a cooler, man. So what'd you do? Well, she says, I picked it up, put it in my car. What do you think I do? I says, oh, wow, really? And then she, wait a minute. And then you're thinking, well, what'd you do with the cooler? She says, well, I finally opened it up. Long pause like she does. Well, what was in the cooler? He says, a toe. I says, a toe? A human toe was in the cooler wrapped in a plastic bag of ice. Well, what'd you do with the toe? She says, I called the tow truck. So that was an example of the stories that she would always tell. So as she got older, she wanted me to go to Walmart with her one day after we'd been to the doctor's office. And so he says, you'll have to go get the cart, the electric cart. And I thought, well, that's pretty humbling, you know, to get on one of them right out to the, I had to go inside and bring it out to the cart for her. So I did that and followed her in the store for ways, and she had to touch everything. She was looking for sheets, and I had some other stuff to get. So I went and got it, picked it up, and time went by and I'm looking for her. And I finally see her touching all these sheets. She would ask people, hey, can you hand me that sheet off? I want to just feel it. I just got to feel the sheet before I bought it. And she couldn't figure out which one she wanted. She finally made a decision, and I'm waiting. I'm impatient. I want to get home. Anyway, she finally, I see her at the checkout stand. So I go over there to help her take the items out of the basket and put on the counter. Well, she thought she would help me. And every time she leaned forward, you know, she'd hit the accelerator. And it would kind of bang into the counter. I said, Dixie, back up, back up. Oh, yeah. So that was an experience. And then, of course, when I got her to the car, and then I had to take the cart back in, I got hung up on the asphalt. And so poor lady came along and tried to push me up with the cart. Anyway, another funny story was when she got older, it was difficult for her to shower. So I said, well, let's buy you a shower head that comes off and you can, you know, shower with the wand, the hose, and that would be really nice for you. And I thought I really done her a favor thinking that I put that on for her. Well, she called me up a week later and says, you know what, this shower just isn't working for me. It's just right there in my face, and I want the old one back. I said, Dixie, you can adjust that. Swivels, you can adjust it, you know, to hit you lower, and then, you know, everything would be fine. Well, she just didn't like that, and eventually a week later she called me up. She said, I really want the old one back. I don't like this new one. So I did put it back, but she still wasn't much on new improvement stuff. She still liked the old stuff. I'm grateful that I was able to be her brother and look forward to seeing her and her stories. She'll be missed deeply by all of us. It won't be the same without her around. I'm grateful for the atonement that I'll be able to see her once again and be in her presence. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Here, sit here.
I don't think I'll start singing the Beastie Boys.
Does it work?
Yeah, I lost the best friend. this. Yeah, talk about the tattoo, or eyeliner. She'd still put it on makeup. She was an airhead. It took a while. And you talk about the spur and well, I'm sarcastic, and so is she. And she chased me with the broom. And she hit me in the head and broke. This is old fashioned broom. And I laughed so hard. And she got so mad that I ran out of the trailer. Well, I ran around the trailer, but I stopped again, and she was coming around, so she thinks she's being around on me. So I laughed and sit there, went to the front door. I come around again, and she's still trying to catch me. At that point, I just walked into the house, and I look out there, and my mom's still going around the trailer. She was that determined. And I could not stop laughing, but there's so many good times we had. And if you got me, myself, and my two boys, we're talking serious funniness. People, we laugh and joke about funniest things. So I finally got her a couple Christmases ago. Bought a fart machine from Amazon. That was cool. Had a remote control. So she's sitting there, we're all sitting there watching a movie, and I decided, push the button. And it sounded good, but I'm making sofa. I said, Mom, try to excuse yourself. I didn't do anything. Like, sure. We waited 5 more minutes. I did it again. I'm like, Mom, you use the bathroom? She goes, I don't know. I might have to go. So she goes back. So I do it again. And I'm like, Mom, so then she started blaming my daughter Shiloh. The Shiloh had nothing to do with that. But she did it again. And she blamed Shiloh. So about an hour and a half later, she finally caught on. We had to tell her. But to see her face, she really thought she was going to. And we got her. And then she didn't want any Christmas gifts. Because she says, if you don't touch it 2 days, you don't need it. So I decided I would just buy her a $40 gift. But in that box, I would just walk around the house and give a sock, a broken fork, some pop ramen noodles, some licorice, and she caught on with that. She's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? So about 4 years later, this last one I just sent to her, she finally caught on, and it was some fun stuff, an outdated calendar. And I guess Cindy came over, so Cindy had planned for all this fun stuff in this box. And it was this stuff around my house, like, let's just throw that in. And that's how she was. You know, she dished it out, and I learned a lot, and she did work 2 jobs to support me, and I didn't see a lot of her sometimes, but she did make sure that I had everything I needed to be successful. As soon as I turned 16, she made sure I had a job. So I got a job at the cemetery. And then she thought I should do some more, so then I was going to be a delivery boy for Shawnee's Floral. And then she met this guy, Craig Shepard at Fred Meyer. So then she got me that job. And then, so I was working 2 jobs, just like her, and that started a great career. And I'm blessed. And she didn't want any football. She didn't want any of this. But I'm so proud to be part of this family. If she was to see this right now, she'd be shocked. She didn't want a coffin because she said they'd mess up the dress, they'd mess up her makeup, they would iron her purple, they probably want to put in her dentures. She just wanted to get over with. But what we've done and accomplished with my family is amazing. It's unbelievable. And she would love all you guys. So thank you very much for coming. Well, I can still sing, right? You know when it's out?
We'll close this meeting now with a closing prayer by Claudia, my wife, daughter-in-law. And then we're gonna head to the cemetery where Gordy will dedicate the grave. And then we need to invite all that you would like to come over to the church in the middle of town in Bandon and have a meal with us before you go home. Thank you.
No, it's both back. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful this day for the many kind words that we've heard spoken today, for the life of our good mother, grandmother, friend, sister, aunt, and neighbor, our favorite Dixie. We're going to miss her, and we're thankful for her life and for the way she's touched our lives throughout the years. We're thankful that we have the plan of salvation, and we know we can see her in the future, which she's in a good place. We're thankful also for the many kind friends and relatives that have come today to share this time with us. And we ask a special blessing on the family, especially Jody and his family as they go forward. Please give them comfort and peace in the days and years ahead, to know how much she loved them and all of us. As the weather is not the greatest today, we ask for safety for those as we travel to our various destinations. We're thankful for the many things that thou dost bless us with daily, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.